Okay.
Okay, thank you, Shoshana. I would like to welcome all of you here to part 3 of a series that we've been running over the last 6 weeks. This one is entitled Managing a Career, and our presenter is going to cover a few important things that you need to know in order to thrive with different people in different environments and different work cultures. This is a series of webinars that we've put on for the benefit of students or educators around the world to help our older students to prepare for work. It's been a pilot series, which means that we are trying to learn from this, and we'll be sending you a questionnaire and asking for your feedback and suggestions right after this webinar is finished. And we also want to make this available for students who weren't able to join us on the day for whatever reason. So we're recording this video, and it will be edited and distributed to people all over the world who attend schools and colleges. Just to ask you please to keep your microphones off unless you're planning to ask a question. And if it's possible, please can you switch your cameras on so that we can all see your faces. We will have an opportunity to have a full question and answers at the end of the presentation. But if you want to ask something at the end of a slide or between slides, I think Charlotte will be happy to take questions directly then. If you think of a question after the webinar is finished, you can submit them by email. And I think Charlotte has been kind enough to say that she'll make herself available. If there is a lot of questions and answers afterwards, she'll make herself available to deal with those questions separately. But if you want to ask a question, I think the group is small enough, you can just unmute yourself and ask. But if you want to ask, or if you want to prefer to type it, you can enter a question in the chat or send a question to me in the chat and privately if you want me to ask something on your behalf or anonymously. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte Nad. Charlotte came to us as a volunteer when we heard that the schools and colleges around the world were going to have to close. We asked anybody who'd be interested in...
You got muted, Daniel.
I was just saying that when the schools and colleges closed, we asked for volunteers who would like to come forward and offer their experience, offer their knowledge, their professional knowledge to our students. And Charlotte came forward, and we felt that she had a lot of wisdom that she could share with you. So we're very grateful to her for preparing this presentation. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Charlotte.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon. I think it's good afternoon for most of you, or good morning as it is for me. Oh, wait. All right, so the agenda for my talk is I'm going to take you through my resume for a couple of minutes so you know where I'm coming from. And then I'm going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes talking about lessons that I've learned. They go for any organization, and then some of them vary by organization. The talk is about careers, but I think you'll find as you listen to me that these issues or concepts transcend organizations and really go into your life, other aspects of your life. And then we can have a dialogue, which includes the Q&A, the question and answer period. I've also given you at the very last slide some topics for you really to think about, sort of take-home ideas or we may want to have time, if you want, we can discuss today if time allows. So there I am, the good student that I was, still am. Who am I? Well, I'm an internal and external consultant that helps drive change through organizations. I've always been an incessant learner based on taking advantage of experiences, opportunities, and I've been curious all my life. I've developed skills over a number of years that have been important, not only in my professional life, but they've also carried over to my personal life. My educational background is that I have a BA in government, an undergraduate degree in government, which taught me a lot of soft skills, how to write, how to think, how to present ideas, how to research an idea, And then I also was forced to socialize outside of what you might call my comfort zone, outside of people that I'd grown up with, because we lived and ate in these small localized dining. So there was a wide variety of people's backgrounds. We were all around the same age group with a similar interest of academics, but we studied different things and we came from different parts, primarily of the US, with vastly different economic backgrounds. And that really made me exposed to a variety of people and learn to socialize with them, which has proven to be useful throughout my career and my life. I then went and I got an MBA in finance to get some hard skills, accounting and finance and statistics. And there we were forced to work in teams, but we self-selected the teams, which is different than your work environment is. From an experiential point of view, for pay, I worked at Citibank for a number of years, all on the corporate side of the house in finance, budgeting, and I worked across borders and cultures, as you might expect, as you would do roll programs out globally. And even within Citibank, there were different cultures, as I'll show you in a minute. And then from there, I went to Hot Jobs, which at the height of the dot-com boom in 2000, it was an internet-enabled recruitment tool. So it was an early job board. Came out of a technical recruiter, and it was a very small organization. It was primarily US driven. It was young, external, and then I went to external consulting, where I've been working remotely and where teams get formed very quickly and they're very transitory. So you may never see these people again either. As a volunteer, my experience is that I've been an officer of the corporation that owns the apartment building I live in New York City. And that has taught me, and I was president at one point, and now I'm the vice president, and taught me to lead and motivate volunteers. And it's one thing, as many of you probably are aware, to lead people when there's a paycheck you can hand out. It's another when you have to do it and they're just doing it for another motivation. And in my college club, I also did events for them. And there I was having to market these events and appeal across generations. So what was going to appeal to the recent graduate and the graduate that was out 50 years? And then this ORT presentation has taught me how to present electronically. This is my first time presenting via Zoom, and it taught me the Google presentation package. Which for some reason, so what lessons did I learn? Learning never stops. You need to be a perpetual learner. Don't think the minute you leave school, you're going to stop learning. And today, and for, I guess, a number of years, you've had to take responsibility for your own career. Many years ago, if you joined an Exxon and you said, I'm joining an Exxon treasury, they'll tell you, well, in 10 years, you'll be here. And if you did all the things and they checked all the boxes, in 10 years, you'd be in that job. But those days are long over. Companies don't lay out career paths for you. You are responsible for your own career. The skills you're going to need will change over time. So just because you have a set of skills today doesn't mean that's the finite number you're going to need. Technology is going to keep changing. My last job at Citibank, was a global business, and they decided that they wanted to hire people who were bilingual. I speak some French, but certainly not French to do business, French to order dinner. And instead I said, work on my French skills? No. So I had then a choice. I either was going to have to leave that area ultimately, or I was going to have to do that on my own. Now, I wasn't that happy for a variety of other reasons, so I never invested in building up my French so I could do business in it. You want to seek out learning opportunities. That's actually what I did when I went to the .com. I wanted to learn about the internet. I really felt it was going to change how we did business. And so I sought that opportunity out, not because I was looking to make my vast fortune in this new startup. And knowledge is transferable over life. So what you learn in one job, you carry over to your personal life, you carry from your personal life experiences back to the job. It all moves back and forth. It's very fluid. You want to learn from history. both your own personal experiences. Sometimes you learn more about yourself in a failure than you do in a success. So that last job I had at Citibank was not really a great personality fit for me, but I did not realize it going in. And then when I got there, I realized that I didn't like the pace of the organization. It was a slower paced than I was happier in. You want to know something about the culture, the economics, and the political environment of the place you're doing business with. So if you're doing business with China, you really want to get some sense of what the Chinese culture is about, what their economy looks like, and a little bit of the history. The history will inform some of how you look at things. So if you understood some of what went on in the 19th century in China, you might better understand some of the ways that they're interacting with us today. Come on. Soft and hard skills are equally important. You want to communicate effectively. And this is more important now that we're working remotely, in writing and orally, because people don't have the attention span you have when you're looking at each other. You want to lay out situations so that others can quickly and easily grasp them. They don't want to work too hard. They want everything sort of very now. Project management skills are critical all through your life, whether and it started with me for research papers. I was asked early in my career to merge some management reporting ways that funding came in through management books and cash books. And that meant working across a number of organizations to get that to happen. But the same thing is true when you go to move. That's also a project. If you move homes, that's a project too. So if you have skills from your corporate life, you can then make your personal life easier to maintain. You want to be able to work across cultures and across generations, because in a global organization, or even sometimes in your home country, you will be working with people from other cultures. And undoubtedly, when you start working, you'll be working with people older, and towards the end of your career, you'll be working with people younger than yourself. You want to manage perceptions. There's an old public relations adage that perception is reality. And it's true. We judge people by how they look, how they talk, and we make these very quick decisions about people. So it's important. And in reality, you always need to be careful, because you don't know how people are connected, even when you don't think it's possible. So out of my personal life, I took my mother to a new doctor recently, a young gentleman. We started talking, and one thing leads to another, and I discovered that he and my cousin were college buddies. Who knew? Life cycle of an idea. You want a strategy and implementation. They're equally important, and sometimes they will evolve together. So the big picture is needed. Again, we had an idea, but the details to bring it live are equally important. When I was at Citibank, we worked on an idea. Our clients were global, we were global. We were doing checking accounts for corporations, for the Exxons and the British Petroleums and Barclays and De Beers of the world. And they said, well, we don't want to have to open up 50 different forms to open 50 accounts in 50 countries. We want one form. Well, there were a lot of details to bringing it live, and I worked on the implementation of that. You had to work with lawyers because you have 50 countries to do business with. And in fact, we couldn't make one form to fit all. We could modify it, and we had to be able to explain to people why, in fact, even though we were requiring something in Argentina and Bank of America wasn't, this is the law. So we had to be able, the details to bring it live were equally important to bring that deal to fruition and to make sure we were protected. Your network of colleagues is essential, both for idea generation, to talk to people, and to implement it. And different people are critical at different points in your life. So early in my career, I was asked to write a presentation for the president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank that one of the vice chairmen of Citicorp and the CFO were giving. In those days, you didn't do PowerPoints or Google Doc presentations. You had to do slides. I worked with these people. They said, well, we are always doing this, so don't come to us. But I needed them to really produce for me. So I needed those people were equally critical to my success. Again, with the ideas of the account opening, I need people in operations and I needed legal staff. And in your personal life, if you, again, when you go to move, you're going to need, might need a realtor, you need the moving people, you might need the electric company, your internet service provider. There are all sorts of people that become critical to your success and can make your life easier or harder. Ideas come up all times of day and night. Don't expect them just when you're sitting in front of your laptop or from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever hours you happen to choose to work. And they can come up when you're walking in the park. And then you have to be able to sell your ideas. And you need to learn the field's language and to use it. So those of you may remember that in the 1970s, the US had a president named Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter told us all to put a sweater on and to let the heat be colder. But nobody listened. Had he been able to sell that idea, we might have less global warming we do today. We might have less emissions. But it wasn't sold, so there we are. You need to be effective in a variety of settings, physical settings. So work can take place these days in the office, at home, in a hotel room, in the airport, on the plane. It's not constrained to an office physical setting, and you need to learn how to make that work for you. So what varies by an organization? Staff member sophistication, the type of business you're in. Is it global? So by that I mean, do they do business with different areas of the world? So trading typically happens in a couple of places in Asia, in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, and maybe Singapore. And then things move to London, a little bit in Frankfurt, and then things move to New York. So you're going to work with people who are familiar with all those places, even if they haven't really lived in them. And that brings one kind of person and one kind of culture and one kind of attitude and mindset. So that's where I started my career. Then I went on to work in the real estate area of Citibank. Well, that's a domestic business. And in fact, it varies even locally within the US. And the consumer business. So those people are very focused on home country. They know, and that's true of any country in the world. It's not only a US phenomenon. This is true wherever you are. The corporate banking services, people knew the home country and the US. And so you didn't have this sophistication that you had on the global businesses. They just knew their country and the US. They had no idea what even went on in the neighboring country in many instances. And so that had its own, when you were trying to roll things out globally, it had its own set of issues and concerns. And then when I got to the tech world, that was borderless. They didn't think there were borders at all. I mean, right? Apple is Apple wherever you go in the world. It's the same product, pretty much. I can talk to my girlfriend in Singapore about what new mobile device I should buy. And she has the access to the same devices that I do. But so when we were in hot jobs, we had to explain to the gentleman that you couldn't just open up and go into Canada and you price it in US dollars and use New York law, which is the one state's law that's typically used. You had to look, do we need a bilingual website? Because now we're in Canada, and do we have to be in French? So these were things that the tech world somehow misses sometimes, or at least did when I was there. So again, there's some people that just think everything is borderless. There's no borders anymore. And the borders are breaking down in some ways, but they still are there, and every country has its own laws. And many have their own language. Consumer business, the customer varies too. Were we in the consumer side? Are you working with retail, which has its own sort of needs and ways people do business when they're dealing with individuals on a mass scale? Or is it high net worth individuals that get a little more personalized attention? Or am I doing business to business? Am I working in with other major corporations, other global corporations? And where in that organization am I dealing? So again, am I dealing like I was in cash management, where the operations people are talking to the operations people and they're just moving money? Or am I dealing in the treasurer's office or the CFO's office or the CEO's office? Organizational culture is influenced by how the money is generated. And that's true whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit, or if it's market-driven, which is anything that's trading, anything in real estate, where things move very quickly, there's more of an urgency and people will move faster. So when I started my career in the funding area of Citibank, we would literally go, I would joke, we'd go from 0 to 60 because we'd be sitting around and suddenly there would be a market opportunity and we would just jump on it. When I went to cash management, it was an annuity. There was a consistent stream of money. The consumer business is a consistent stream of money. Philanthropy can be a consistent stream of money from endowments, or it can be this one big lump of money that comes in from a major donor. And you have, as a result, people respond slower because there's not that urgency, because they feel it can wait till tomorrow. They don't feel that tomorrow it won't be there. The tech world has that kind of urgency because they feel that tech is changing so fast. The scientific world you could look at, there's an urgency to finding a COVID vaccine and a treatment. Cancer treatments or cardiology issues, there may not be that same kind of urgency because we have certain tools in the toolbox already and you're looking to improve on them. You need to look at the education and experiential background of who you're going to be working with. Are these people well educated? Where have they lived? What have they done? Are they well traveled? What are their interests? To see if it's a fit for you, to see if you're comfortable in that background. How fluent are they in languages? I have colleagues that are came from Europe, the continent, and are multilingual. And then I have colleagues who were Asian, who are very fluent in English in their local language. Americans, we tend to be fluent in English because we never have traveled much. For a lot of years, we didn't have to leave. And the French too, a lot of them don't speak many languages because they didn't ever leave France. How aware are you beyond your home country? If you're going to work with a global group of people, you need to understand something about their religions. When I was in that cash management business, that global business, we had a meeting at the end of October. 80 people from around the world. Turned out 4 of them were celebrating Diwali. Well, none of us had heard of this Hindu holiday. So it was a bit of a faux pas. It was a bit of created some bad feelings. On the other hand, I had a boss who was Jewish. He had business reviews scheduled for him in Hong Kong in the fall, early fall. Turned out one of them was Yom Kippur. Somebody who was Jewish in New York said to me that they were anti-Semitic. Somebody else said to me, no, they didn't even know what Yom Kippur was. They'd never heard of this holiday. Food preferences are driven by religion and by where people live. So you need to understand, do I have somebody who's South Indian who may be a vegetarian? Do I have somebody who's from the Middle East and maybe observe halal? Or do I have an Israeli who wants to keep kosher? And these all impact what food you serve and to make people feel comfortable. There are local conventions. What time do people eat? I saw a group in France of Chinese tourists. They were taking them to Chinese food at 6 o'clock. It seemed cruel. They weren't eating at 7:30, 8 o'clock the way the French did, and they weren't getting to even try French food. What hours do people work? In Germany, you only work 40 hours a week per the Workers' Council. That's all they let you work. And in other places in Asia, they'll work all sorts of hours. What are the local employment laws? Again, that was in Germany, you can only be so many feet from the window. People, if you didn't know that, what are the rules around what you can do? In Asia, you work, some countries, they still work a half a day, or used to at least, work a half a day on Saturday. What are their willingness to work non-traditional hours? I did a call once and we had somebody in Singapore. I was at 7 o'clock in the morning, that's 7 o'clock at night their time. He was still in the office doing the call. In Germany, you could never have found that. I had to do a transaction stream with Germany. They told me they left at 4 o'clock. I got a call and get everything in before 4. I had a 6-hour time difference. It was on me to come in early. What's the size of your organization? What are the demographics? How many employees do you have? How many locations? How fast do people turn over? And this again applies to other things you're looking at in life. How large a city do you want to live in? How large a synagogue would you want to join, or a church, or a group? Do you want to go to a college or university that's huge? Do you want to go to one that's small? As staff turns over, it's harder to build your network because people are always moving around. In a large organization, you may find it difficult to know who the senior leaders are. It may be difficult. You may not feel as significant as you would in a smaller organization, or you may have to break it down into a smaller group, and you may have, whether it creates any difficulty with you building your network within the organization, which again is critical to your getting things done. I know you've had one presentation earlier on networking, but the network is just critical to how you get things done. So now you've heard me for about 25 minutes, half hour. Does anyone have any questions? Everything was so clear?
I think if you just want to unmute your microphone and ask your question to Charlotte, I think that will work. If it starts to get too messy, then we'll introduce the system. But I don't mind asking the first question, and
Sure.
Other people can jump in with theirs. Earlier on, you were talking about the equal importance of big picture strategy and detail. Being able to implement and get things done. Are you talking there about, or from your experience, are you talking about individuals or teams? Because some people are naturally better at looking at the big picture and thinking in those terms, while others are very good at details, but not necessarily so good at the bigger picture.
I actually do both. I actually work on the big picture and do the details, because to me, they're very linked. Ideally, in a team, you'll need both. If you're forming a team, you want people who do both. You want people who, and there's an expression about thinking outside of the box and people who think inside the box. People who think about a problem as it's presented and think about what are you trying to accomplish with the problem. So you need a variety of skills. And you need to understand that different people have different strengths and weaknesses. And you need to draw on those. Those are also something as you widen out your team. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of a team. Like when you're moving, you may not have the luxury of a team to assist you. You may be the team. You yourself, me, myself, and I may be it. Or you may have a partner or a spouse who may be good at the one and you're good at the other. You found the location and they do the details of the move. So there are times in life when you just may not have anyone else to draw on. But if you're forming a team, whether it's paid or volunteers, ideally, yes, you would get people with both sets of skills. And make sure the people who do the implementation feel valued.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because sometimes we don't put that much value on the details.
Yeah, I think in organizations, it's, the more senior you get, the more you're dealing with big picture, and the more junior you get, the more you're dealing with details. It seems to be that way.
It is, although sometimes you have people who are micromanagers. You do encounter the micromanagers of the world and who can't let go of those details. And it's hard. You have to have, if you're the person doing the details, you have to have a really good rapport you have to be close in thinking with the person whose strategy you're implementing, because that person may not be able to articulate it, and you may have to do the probing to get those ideas out, to flesh out the details. And the person may not realize it themselves. Early in my career, I was presented with a proposal to analyze from one of the investment banking houses. And I said to the gentleman, and I kept working with him, I said, I really don't understand how this product's going to work. And I really don't understand how I would tell my back office how to book the transaction. Well, this was way too mundane for him, and you could tell. But when we were done with the whole discussion, he said to me, I didn't understand the product either and how it worked. But he didn't even realize it. So sometimes it really is a matter of working through with that person who thinks he has the strategy, but in fact, she may not. She may have some of the strategy, but not really quite understand how it's operating.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You spoke a lot about lots of skills and abilities that you think are important. I was just wondering, I don't know if you can answer this, but what you thought like the role of school education could be in these skills and like how to sort of obtain them within a school environment?
Well, I thought that my writing skills and my presentation skills were really honed in my undergraduate background of studying political science and how to think and how to do research. I thought all that was really honed, and knowing what to do, what needed to be done and what didn't. All of that was really honed in that relatively, what you might call esoteric sort of education, where I studied. I learned about office politics a little bit by taking a class in Latin American politics, about power arrangements. We were a relatively small school, 2,800 students, so we were able to get to, by interacting with people of varying backgrounds, it really helped me when I got to Citibank and I had to work with people from all over the world with all sorts of different backgrounds and all sorts of economic backgrounds from those years overseas in other countries. There are some hard skills you can acquire. Obviously, depending on what you study, there's a big emphasis in this country, at least, on what's called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, finance, accounting, all those skills you can acquire in an undergraduate setting, I believe. Depending on how specialized, you can certainly get language skills. If you have an opportunity to study outside of your home country and the world opens up again, I would try and take it, but I would also make sure that I got out and I got a chance to mingle with people who were local. In my day, which is many years ago, if you went abroad, you studied in local language. Now, for the American universities, that is no longer true. You can take courses in English if you're studying in Geneva. The government program was in Geneva. All the coursework, all the classes, all the books, everything was in French. You were studying in French. In fact, you were encouraged to speak French 100% of the time in the Paris program. So when you went to dinner with your classmates, you were encouraged to speak in French. The goal was to be total immersion, sort of the way the Israelis teach Hebrew to newcomers. It was a total immersion. But today, I don't know if that's still true. And for a lot of programs, it's not. So, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
Well, hi, Charlotte. My name is Tomas, and I'm a student from Argentina.
Okay.
I'd like to ask you about organizational skills and when deciding when you're a leader of a team and you need people to, I don't know, manage different things. Should you? Is it okay to have friends being part of the team, or would you recommend to differentiate like personal life from like these organizations and job and whatever?
Well, as you work, you're going to form friendships out of those. Some of them will be friendships just while you're working together and they'll sort of drift apart. And some of those will be friendships that will stay with you. and so it's sometimes what's called the chicken and the egg. So I worked with a woman on a monthly report we had to produce, and she was the secretary to this committee. I gave her a lot of the material that went to the committee. We worked closely together so she understood what she was presenting. Out of that, we're still friends 25 years later, 30 years later. So sometimes you become friends with the person you're working with, and sometimes you wind up working with people on a team. What's important is to make sure that they have the skills that you need, and you're not just picking them because they're a friend of yours. There's certainly a comfort level when you know that somebody you work with thinks sort of along the same lines you do, so it makes it easier. Particularly in a lot of the work I've had to do, I've had to be sort of anticipate what their thinking was. Early in my career, I had a boss who said, you need to anticipate me. And that was a very good point, that you have, but you can't do that with everyone. You don't always think the same way. And I had one boss, I never could think the same way she did. I had a boss who I never could follow the way he explained anything. So I understood it, but I would never have understood it from the way he did. So that's an important factor when you're picking your team, whether it's for professional reasons or volunteer. In my career, I really didn't get many opportunities to pick the team I had. I had to really use them based on their subject matter expertise. A little bit so on the volunteer side, that I was able to sort of recruit people. But that's not always true either. You don't always get that option. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and
Oh, my pleasure.
thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Charlotte, I have an anonymous question.
Oh, sure.
So I can express it properly. You mentioned early on that in school, you know, people are looking out for you and making sure you have the right learning experiences to get to the next stage. Whereas in work, you have to take that responsibility a lot more on yourself to seek out opportunities. So the question is, how would you advise companies, or what approach would you think companies should have about this continuous education and professional development in the workplace? How much should they be looking out for you and spotting your potential and looking for opportunities to develop that through training? And how much of it should be you identifying, you know, I need to learn this, I need to develop into this area, and doing it in your spare time? Because quite often if the company's paying for it, I guess, you know, they can pick and choose who they want to train and what they want to give. But where have you seen that really working well, and what were they doing that made it work well?
Well, early in my career, which is many years ago, Citibank did a much better job of providing training opportunities for people. And historically, companies wanted to invest in their people. Unfortunately, I think in more recent years, and I think it's the case now, there's very little training goes on. I think there is still the ability to get reimbursed for training courses, particularly if they're towards a degree. You need to work with your individual manager, and that's why the network becomes even more critical to you, because you need mentors. All through your life, you need mentors, or at least colleagues that you can bounce ideas off of, people with different backgrounds that you can say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And you can learn. Some people are able to use social media for that, actually. I had a colleague who's a techie and who says he joined Facebook for professional reasons, to learn about opportunities. There's LinkedIn. But some of it, unfortunately, you really have to look at what other skills people have, look at the backgrounds of other people. That's why I say you might be fortunate in college, depending on the school you go to find somebody who will do this and help you. You may have an advisor who will take an interest and look at your classes and say, this is what you should be taking, or that. or you may have somebody older who's a mentor, who's willing to mentor you, or even an older sibling who may, who's just a few years out of school, who may be able to tell you how to approach it. But as you go through your career, you're going to need mentors, and you're going to need that network of people to help you. Because unfortunately, corporations are not very good these days. Again, early in my career, when we first introduced personal computers, which I'm sure most of you wouldn't remember there ever was a time without personal computers, they came in and they taught us how to use some of the packages. Now you're just sort of expected to pick that up. All this technology you're certainly expected to pick up. And as I said, by the end of my career, they weren't even willing to build on my language skills and pay for it. Now, you could say maybe that I wasn't a fit for the department, but I thought that was really unfortunate. I had spent a number of years in the organization, and now they're not willing to invest in me any longer. Mm-hmm. So it's not as easy as it used to be, unfortunately, and I don't see it getting easier. I wish I did.
So following on a little bit from that, the opportunities for you to develop and to grow might be a little bit fewer, harder to find. What would be your advice to a young person who can hold out and keep looking for a more suitable job, or they can take a job right now that will give them some experience? Maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's not exactly the culture that they would dream of, but is it worth them taking on a job just to build up some work experience, to build up their resume with, to be in work for a couple of years, even if it's not what they're looking for?
I think it is. Personally, I think it is. I think it's worth it because there's certain basic skills that when you transition from the academic world to the business world, or to whatever you're doing, that change. There's certain expectations you have to. My first job when I was in college, when I was still in college, I spent one summer working as an admin assistant, an administrative assistant, a secretary, typing and filing. And people said, well, you learned the whole button. I said, yes, I learned where the whole button was in those days. Now you don't get many phone calls. But I also learned how to work with people that were older than I was. I learned how to work with people whose backgrounds were different, who didn't value necessarily the things I was doing. I learned I would help these people. I look at their writing, and you're typing in those days, you could say, well, maybe you want this word, or did you mean this word? So you learn those soft skills again about interacting and picking up how to deal with people that are different than you are. Again, when you're in university, you're dealing with people who are very similar in age to you, and who, regardless of where they came from, they're all united in wanting this experience. I went to a very academic school in a small town, and so everyone was united in that goal for this very academic experience. And almost everyone had parents who were also supportive of that goal. So then you got out and you worked with people who were really questioning it. Well, you don't really know how to type well? Well, what use to you? So you can write a nice essay. Who cares? You don't know how to type. So you learn, actually, that summer forced me to learn to type well. And to this day, I'm a whiz at the keyboard. Who knew that was going to be such a valuable skill 15 years out when I started taking laptops to meetings and taking my notes into the laptop, and people would watch me go, whoa, you're fly over that keyboard. So sometimes what you don't think is useful becomes useful later in life. You just have to keep putting things in the tool, as an old consultant of mine said, in your toolkit. Keep putting them in, and you never know when you want to pull one of those things out again.
Okay, I've got an anonymous question here. It's about internships. You often find, I think, particularly in creative industries, where there's a lot of people looking for jobs and there's not enough jobs for everybody, they quite often offer internships, sometimes unpaid internships, to fresh graduates straight out of high school, straight out of college. They're usually not well paid. Some people might think they're a little bit exploitative. What's your experience of those, and do you think they are a good way to build up skills for young people?
I think anything you do that gets you out builds up skills. That being said, there's been a big push in the US, at least, to get rid of those unpaid jobs because they were exploitive of students. And you need to be careful to make sure that you are getting, you're not just being turned into the person that gets the coffee and becomes the anonymous coffee getter. And I guess these days we're not getting much coffee, but you know, those kind of, you're making the copies and sending the books out. So you really need to see if there's some meat to what you're doing, some substance, as well as getting some visibility. Or alternatively, some programs have what's called work study. And so you can actually get some academic credit for them. In fact, some programs require it. So I knew a friend of mine went to culinary school, went to learn to cook, and he actually had to work in kitchens as part of the academic program. And he got a job offer as a result. This was sort of a second career for him, so he turned down the job offer. But it was probably a decent place to start for him had he wanted to do that. So sometimes they do lead to jobs. Sometimes it teaches you what you don't like and what you do like. About it, that first job I really didn't enjoy because it wasn't, they managed money, the business managed money for high net worth individuals. Everything was done perfectly, but slowly. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm graded 90% is really good. 92% is fine to me. It's really, that's an A- in US grading terms. That's great. 9 out of 10. Other people want 10 out of 10 or 10 plus 10.5 out of 10. So you have to, again, it teaches you about the culture. And when you're starting out, you don't really know. What you think you want may not be what you want. I had friends that picked out universities to start and transferred after the first year or even the first semester because they were so miserable.
Great, thank you. Charlotte, okay. Do you want to move on to the discussion points that you talked about?
Sure, I had one more slide. These are really, unless people, we could take a few minutes and discuss them, but things that I think that you need to keep in mind as you're moving forward in your, over time. So not anything you're going to get an answer to today. You want to expand your knowledge of global religions, geographies, and customs. And I want to talk about how you might do that without leaving home. Think about how you can do that without leaving home. Sorry, there's a typo there. And when having the opportunity to travel. So those are two distinct times. Sometimes you go through countries in what I call a bubble, like those Chinese tourists I was talking about. I have traveled in East Asia, in Indonesia, and in Thailand. And you don't travel the way you do in a London or a Paris. You're not on the public transportation, even before COVID. And you're not necessarily in stores where you're going to be rubbing shoulders with people who are local, where they shop. It's not really conducive or comfortable to go to the food markets. You can only see them from sort of a van. So different places mean different things. You need to think about how you're going to build your network and maintain it. Social media is a very powerful tool, I know, for young people to use. There are also in-person activities. You want to keep in touch with people. That's either phone or email them or text them. It's not a lot of effort. It's just sometimes a 2-minute, like you see an article and you just copy it and paste it and send an email. Hey, thinking of you. And it's a way to keep you on top of their mind, that you come back to mind. and they want to do you a favor. You know, it's a little bit of paying it forward is the current language. You need to think about what is the likelihood of job descriptions in 2040 being the same as in 2020. And if you think it's unlikely, which is what I do, what are the implications for you and your peers? I had a discussion with a friend of mine's daughter who'd graduated law school a couple of years ago, and her father was a lawyer, partner in a prestigious law firm in New York. He started out in mergers and acquisitions. She said that same M&A, mergers and acquisition associate's job is there. I said the job is there, but what the job consists of is very different. So even if a job title is there, what that job entails is very different than what it did 40 years ago when her dad was starting out. What do you think the probability of the job market being more or less global in 2040? Do you think countries are going to pull in as a result of COVID and stay inward? Or do you think we're going to push back out and globalism is here to stay? I have an opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. I think the global market is here to stay. I think if anything, the employment market is going to become more competitive as we learn to work more and more remotely. People won't even feel the need to be able to get work permits in countries. They'll just leave you in the country you were in. And in fact, Citibank has started to move to that, to moving to their jobs for East Asia. It started to be moved to be headquartered on the West Coast so people could just fly over the Pacific because it was too expensive to keep people, and they found that was cheaper to keep people and their families in those countries. And maintaining the idea generation flow. There have been a lot of articles here in New York recently about working remotely and working in the office, and how is working remote here to stay? And then if it is, people have found that ideas don't get generated as well when you don't have those easy interactions with people. So again, these are all things that I think as you move forward, you need to keep in mind as you're going forward. Make sense?
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
I just wanted to say to you something that you said earlier on, that ideas don't just come while you're sitting at your desk. And I know that you told me that you've spent a lot of time thinking about these topics to put into the presentation. You've condensed a lot of different experiences and covered a lot of ground. So we're really grateful. I know so much thought and planning went into this, and it was valuable for me, and I'm sure it was valuable for people here, and also hopefully for people who watch the video later on. So thank you very much from all of us.
All right.
Sincerely, thank you. I also want to say that we'll be in touch with people who have joined us today to try and get some feedback on how we can improve these this webinar series in the future, what topics you'd like to see covered, and whether the format still works for you, or whether you're getting Zoom fatigue, or what we can do to help to meet your needs. But thank you, all of you, for turning up, and I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Thanks again, Charlotte.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.